Morning, everyone. Yeah, and we have to start with some the most important stuff, which are the jokes, I think, obviously. Um, so pictures, yes. So what is the most crowded and caring boat called? Yeah, a friendship. Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Fine. Why are pirates so bad at learning alphabet? Oh, because they are all stuck at sea. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Did that? Yes, fine. Last one. Really, that made me laugh a lot, but however. Why do scuba divers fall backwards off the boat? Exactly. That is very funny. No, didn't get that one. This is very fun. No, I was. Yeah, because if they fell forward, they would still be on the boat. Yeah, like, okay, that was it. Thank you so much for today. So the topic today is boating with Jesus, whatever that means. No, I felt that's quite interesting. And if you've been with Threshold for a while, you know that we are talking about boats and harbors. But I didn't even think about that when I got the impression from God I should talk about boats and I should look into the Bible as to what's happening when Jesus is around boats, on boats, around boats. And so that's what we're going to look at today. But before, I just thought also to reflect just a little bit as to why it's important or it's meaningful for us to be talking about boats and harbors. Because if you're like me and you grew up in a non-church environment, and when you heard the word church, or in my context, that was église, yeah, it was, but whatever, you would think of a building, yes? Yeah, church is a building. And could be a lovely building like the slide on the left. It's the Peterborough Cathedral. If you've never been to Peterborough, you can visit the cathedral. It's amazing. And that's it. Or it could be a very modern, the second one. Went to Korea in the summer, visited this building, a very modern, contemporary church, award-winning. Very nice. However, these are buildings, and buildings, and for most of you know, the church is not a building. It has become a building because that's what, Christians have done for many centuries, meeting in building. And when we've had official churches, and in the UK, in France, Spain, Italy, where most people would belong to the church. And it's normal in that context that the church, the building, becomes the central place because nearly everyone is a Christian. And what is directed, what is done by the church is toward the people of God. And this is the place where the teaching is happening, where worship is happening, and that makes sense. That makes sense if most people are Christians, because what we're being called to by God, by Jesus, is not to go in buildings. I know that's just funny. If you read the Gospels, Jesus is barely talking about the church. He mentions it, I think, a couple of times. One. About Peter, and that's it. What matters to Jesus is the kingdom of heaven. That's what is most important in the gospel. And what is important in bringing the kingdom of heaven are people, us, and we are the called out one. And that's what he does in the gospel. He calls out people, and that's ecclesia, that's the church. Literally in Greek, that means the people who are called out of their own situation. So the church is the body of people who are called out to follow Jesus. And I could be the last picture on the boat. Doesn't need to be a building. But just the metaphor is important because we need to replace the church building metaphor with something else. Because metaphors are powerful. They shape the way we see the world, and because they shape what we see, they also limit what we can do. So it's very important for us to replace the metaphor of the church as a building. So let's have a look as to what is Jesus doing in boats. And when we got into boats, well, boats are, well, you've been on boats? Most probably, yes. I grew up by the sea, so I've been on many boats. Well, I know, yeah, not everybody who grows by the sea goes on a boat, but I did when I was maybe 5, and then 6, and then I sailed a lot. So boats, yes, but we are familiar, but boats have functions, and there are different boats for different things. When I was sailing, the boat was actually the activity. Everything was about the boat. It didn't matter really where I was going, trying to sail a dinghy. It doesn't really matter where you go. Well, there is racing and stuff, but what matters is what's happening on the boat. But also, of course, many of you will have taken boats to go somewhere, from one place to another, maybe crossing the channel, La Manche, which is its real name, by the way. Yeah, whatever. No, we won't enter the debate here. I'm just telling you what's its name. Yeah, we agree. Yeah, of course. Spanish friends, of course. So you may have taken a ferry, and that's the point, is the destination. You're going from one place to another. Yeah? But what we're going to see in the extracts of the Bible that I want us to focus on today is that Jesus is interacting with both elements of it. There are things which are happening on the boats, and obviously the boats also have a point. And some of the most famous stories in the Bible, at least famous for people who are not in the church, are happening around boats. So let's have a look at Mark 4. So at the beginning of Mark 4, Jesus is on one side of the Sea of Galilee, and he's preaching the good news of the kingdom through parables. But where, I've never really noticed this, is on the boat. So Mark 4, again, Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it out on the lake, while all the people were along the shores at the water's edge. He taught them many things by parables. So first obvious thing, what can we do with our boats, is to reach out, to tell about our stories. And the story of Jesus is the story of the kingdom coming. And our stories are stories of how we met Jesus, how he touched us, how he transformed us. These are stories we can share. If you are a Christian, if you've met Jesus, then you have a story to tell. You have a story to share. How you became a Christian is powerful. How you encounter the kingdom is powerful. People want to know about this, actually. So, boats, sharing the good news of the kingdom. But of course, it's not everything about what can boats do. And if we read further, that, of course, boats, they move. They're great. They're not stuck in one place, but try to move a building. It's not that easy. Actually, earthquakes, yes. And actually, yes, there are churches which have been moved, literally been moved hundreds of meters. But okay, not easy though. Yeah? No. Lincoln Cathedral, I'm not sure you can easily move it around. Just saying, try maybe. But the boat is moving, and the story can be shared in different places. And that's what Jesus is doing in Mark 4. And if we go to Mark 4:35, and so that day he has taught during the day, he has shared the gospel in metaphors, in parables. And in Mark 4:35, it says that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and he was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." It's an amazing story, and you probably have heard and read it quite a few times because it's a cool story. Jesus is the master of the universe. He's God, he's God the Son, and he controls the weather. And you think, oh, that's the cool thing about the story. But that's not what struck me here the most, is what he says and what the disciples were on the boat. And if we are called to travel together on boats to be fellow pilgrims, then at some point, sometimes we may forget that Jesus is with us. Maybe Jesus may be sleeping on the stern of the boat. Why? Because he's in control. He's always in control. Even when we don't realize that he's in control, he is in control. And you know that he will be with you if you go where he tells you to go. Because if we rewind the story, it starts by saying, "Let us go over to the other side." And I believe that's the reason he's rebuking the disciples, because he has told them that they will cross the sea. That's what Jesus has said. And what Jesus has said is going to happen. So the disciples should have known they will cross the sea, regardless of the storm. That was Jesus' instruction. They were following the instruction. And when they are reminded that Jesus is with them, of course, Jesus intervenes because he's a good God. Jesus intervenes, but it reminds us we can lose sight of Jesus when we are traveling. We can be afraid. And that's okay to be afraid, because there are things we don't, which hurt us. The pain of losing loved ones, disease, illness. Of course, we can be afraid. I don't think it's a problem. The problem is forgetting who is with us. Because if we forget that, then we stay stuck on the fear. But if we remember that Jesus is traveling along because we are on a journey with him, then we know that we will be able to face the challenges that are coming. The storms of life, they will not disappear. I know that there are some ways of presenting the gospel. The good news of Jesus is that if you become a Christian, then everything is going to be rosy in your life. Everything is going to be fine, Yeah. If you've been a Christian for more than a week, you probably know that's not true. It's never been the promise of Jesus that your life is going to be smooth sailing. The promise of Jesus has always been that he will be with you until the end of the earth, until the end of the age. That's the promise. He will be with you. If you stick with him, he will be there. So, boats first, yeah. There are many boats, by the way, in the story as well. Choose your boat. The boat, you will be with Jesus on that boat, but you need to choose a boat. And you need to know where to go. You need to listen to him, and he will instruct you where to go. Continue Mark, and Jesus travels, of course, they reach the other side of the sea. And Jesus does what he does. He heals people. And in Mark 5, he heals a man who was demon-possessed. So demons are cast out. And this is the reaction in Mark 5:18. As Jesus was getting in the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So that the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus has done for him. And all the people were amazed. Not all people will be on the same boat. And Jesus will actually sometime tell you to go somewhere else, somewhere you don't want to go initially. Because this is the place where you ought to go. This is the place you'll be most effective in talking about the kingdom. And the man who had been set free from demons, of course he wanted to be with Jesus. That makes sense to me. But Jesus tells him, no. You have an amazing story to tell. And if you share this story, actually people will want to hear it. And you will touch people. And that's exactly what happens. He goes back and he tells his own story. And they knew him. They knew he had these problems in this life. And they will see the transformation. So, yes, we all have a story to tell. There is no one who has become a Christian who doesn't have a good story to tell. But that's one thing the boats do. They move us from one place to another where we are supposed to go. If we are following the instructions of Jesus, then things are going to happen. Kingdom will come. People will hear the good news, and some will join in. But boats are also a good time. They are also a time which is important for us. There is also a time for us to be built up by Jesus, to gather and to prepare. In Mark 6, which follows Mark 5, I know, it's kind of amazing. But in between, what's happening is that Jesus is sending his disciples 2 by 2 to share the good news. So they are being sent 2 by 2, and they go, they heal people, they cast out demons, and they come back to Jesus. And that's Mark 6. And it says the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. So boats are also places where we can be on our own, where we can be just with Jesus to be built up by him through his Spirit. But boats are also a training place, and that's the continuing story in Mark 6. But I'm not going to read from Mark 6. I'm going to read the story from Matthew 16. It's the same story, a very famous story, is Jesus walking on the water. So even as a non-Christian before, in front, that's a story which is part of the common culture. People don't really know what's happening, but that Jesus has walked on the water, at least, is part of still a common culture. But why? Why does it matter to us this morning? Well, let's read Matthew 16:22. So they are going again to the other side of the sea. Again, they are traveling. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus... Oh, yes. Do that. I'm reading more than... Okay, I'll finish the story. "Oh, Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I'll just stop there, but again, an amazing story. Jesus is not on the boat this time physically, but he had told the disciples again to cross the water. They are under his instruction again. And he's far, and Jesus does what he can do. He decides he can walk on the water, which is amazing, which, of course, is not something I can do. Have you tried? But that's what's interesting, is that on this journey, Jesus is going to train the disciples again. He's going to train them first to recognize him, to recognize his presence, even when you are unsure as to whether he is there. You can, through the Spirit, recognize him because he is God. And when he says, "It is me, it is I," and here it is a reference to the great I am, who is the Lord. What's the Lord's name? It's I am who I am, and it is the I am. It is the existence which we can always recognize because he is always present in this universe. But the other thing is, yes, we can be trained on our journey with God. And a boat should be a safe place. And a safe place to try things out. It was a safe place for Peter to say, "Oh, I want to do that. That's very cool what you're just doing, Jesus. I just want to try." And Peter, if you realize, in the Bible, is quite, he does think, and then he thinks. He has this tendency to just act and then think, "Oh." And then he realizes, "Ooh, I'm on the water. There are waves. There's wind. Oh, I'm drowning." Yeah. Which I feel like, yeah, that's okay. But the interesting bit is you can try out. On the boat, you're safe to try. You should be safe to try. To try out, I don't know, have you ever thought about sharing a word of knowledge? On a boat in your community with your brothers and sisters, you should be safe to try. Maybe you heard wrong, but that's okay. It's okay because you will test that with brothers and sisters. It's okay to share your dreams and visions. It's okay to share whatever you understand God is telling you. It's okay to try. And maybe you will not succeed at first. But on that boat, it is safe to try. Because it is Jesus who is with us also. So, yes, Peter at the end failed in that story. But we know what happened later. It's because Peter tried several times that he is the one on which the church was built. That's what Jesus promised afterwards. So, boats. And I've taken this picture from the website somewhere. So you should recognize them. There are pictures which have been shared. But just to bring things together, these two stories that I shared about Jesus and boats, I think are very important to us because they should be a reminder as to what we are supposed to be doing. We are not gathering because of a building. We are not gathering because, really? I don't think you have a particular attachment to that particular building as a building. It's great, there's heating, there's light. It's a great place to gather. But what matters is what is happening when we are gathered together. The worship, the building up which is happening. So it's not the building. The church is definitely not about the building. But the metaphor we are sharing and we believe is important and is helpful are boats, a harbor. Why? Because if you are a Christian, then you are committed to follow Jesus. You have been called out of your situation. You are part of the ecclesia. You are part of the church. And to be called out, you need to go. Well, the going may be metaphorical. It may be your household that you are being called to. There's nothing in the Bible, I believe which tells us about the format of a boat, how many people should be on the boat, the size, the color, the shape. It doesn't say anything about this. But what matters is that you have a vision that you are on a journey. And on this journey, where you've been called out by Jesus, it's good to be surrounded by people. You don't have to. But it's better to be surrounded by people. Because when you are surrounded by people, you can be comforted. You can be prayed for. You can test the visions you have. That's the boat. And we believe these boats are useful. So if you are not in something you believe is a boat, it would be good to pray. It would be good for you to pray to know, are you in the right place? But is there a journey that actually Jesus is calling you onto? You may be already in the right place. I said there is nothing in the Bible which just tells us, that there are rules about boats and what to be doing. What matters is the calling that you have received. But a calling we have received, each and every one of us. No one is excluded. We all have a part to play, regardless of the place you are in, the situation you are in. So, God is with you. The Spirit is with you. Choose your boat.